In 2005, it was estimated there were 6.5 billion people living in the world. By the year 2012, this is expected to increase to 7 billion, and 99% of that growth will be in developing countries. According to the Sunday Times on 5th September 2005, there were 64,322,790 people in the world diagnosed HIV positive. Also, 85% of all school children walk to school. 2.3% of them take more than an hour to get there. Hi, I'm Eloise Cupido. In this series of lessons, we'll be dealing with an area of mathematics known as data handling. But what's the use of all these numbers? Well, whether you're in business, advertising, government, or education, you can use statistics like these to make decisions. Stats SA uses statistics and data handling to collect, organize, and represent information about all the people in our country. For example, data about pensioners was collected in 2001. During that year, there were 349,740 pensioners living in South Africa. The government uses this information to help them decide how much money to put aside for pensions. If they're wrong, they could find themselves paying out far more than expected, and this could cause problems for the overall budget of the country. But how are these statistics worked out? How does the government know how many pensioners there are? How do they know how many children walk to school? Don't the numbers change all the time? This is where data handling comes in. To get the statistics they need, researchers need to ask questions. But before that, they need to work out for themselves what it is that they need to find out. Then they can collect information to help them find the answers. When they've collected enough data, they need to sort it out or organize it in some way. After that, they have to find ways to represent the data. Representing the data on a tally table, in a written report, or with a graph helps to interpret the data. Then the data can be analyzed in order to make important decisions. We will discuss and use all these steps throughout the series. But in today's lesson, we will start at the beginning of the data handling process with some important questions. What do we want to find out? What kind of research will we need to find that out? And how will we collect the data for this research? By the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify what data you need for a research project and identify methods to collect data. Instead of just talking about data and learning about how governments and researchers use statistics, let's visit some learners who are busy planning a concert at their school. The money they raise will go to a feeding scheme at one of the local primary schools. I'm pretty sure they'll be able to use data handling to help them with their planning.
How about we do something different with the music this year? Like heavy metal.
No. No, that is just like way too loud for me. I prefer something more softer, romantic.
No, people, listen. We can't hire a band that suits everybody's taste. We need to find out what most people like. Then find one really good band.
It looks like Cindy, Gerard, and Sigra already have a problem. Let's go over and chat to them. Hi there, people. You sound like you've got a bit of a problem.
Hi there. We do have a problem. The thing is, last year's concert was very successful. Nearly every student came and they brought their friends along.
Yeah, but this year we want the concert to be even better. But the problem is we all new on the committee, and we worried about the planning.
How far have you got with your plans?
So far, we've only decided on what each of us is going to do.
My job is to find a band, and I think Squatter Camp really rocks. But then Segra and Gerard like other bands, and we can't invite them all.
And we need to decide how much to charge for the tickets. Because if we make it too cheap, we won't be able to cover our costs or raise enough money for this feeding scheme. And if we make it too expensive, then people won't come.
I'm in charge of the catering, but I'm not sure what food people like. And I don't want to waste my money buying something that they're not going to eat.
Gerard prefers hamburgers. I love hot dogs. Segra is a vegetarian, so she can't eat hamburgers or hot dogs.
Sigra, what do you have to organize?
Well, I'm in charge of the security and parking, so I need to know how many people are going to be coming to the concert and whether they're coming by car, so I can make sure there's enough parking spaces, or whether they're coming by taxi, so I can make sure there's a safe drop-off zone.
Also, we need to know if people are going to walk to here. And if so, we need to ask some of the parents in the community if they can help with security for them.
Yeah, but there's just so much to organize, and we're not sure that we've thought of everything. Can you suggest where we should start with this planning?
I think you've made a good start already. You've thought of some of the issues that need to be sorted out. Now I think you could use some data handling.
Data handling? Is that some type of maths? How can it help us?
Okay, let me explain what data is and what data handling is, then you can decide whether you can use it or not. Data is a collection of facts or pieces of information. For example, the prices of food at the school tuck shop are data. The names of all the learners in your class make up a group of data. The temperatures and rainfall amounts given in the weather report are data. In fact, if you look in any newspaper, you'll find it's full of data. Data that has not been organized in any way is called raw data. So the names of the learners in your class are raw data until you organize them into an alphabetical class list.
Okay, that's all interesting, but I still don't see how it's going to help us with our concert.
From what I've heard so far, you don't sound sure what band to book or what food to sell. Also, you don't know what security and parking will be needed. You can find all of this out using data handling.
Okay, so what do we do?
First, you need to decide exactly what data you want to collect, who you will collect it from, and how you will collect it.
We all know what we want to collect. Cindy wants to know what band to invite to the concert.
Okay, but Cindy, how will you find out what band you want? In other words, what data do you want to collect?
I need to find out how many people like Squatter Camp.
Hey, but that's not fair. You need to give people a choice and ask them to pick one.
Sigra has a point. You need to ask people which band they prefer, and you'll need to limit their choice to about 4 bands.
I guess so. And the bands that are on the list are the ones that have to be available on the night.
Gerard, what about you? You need data about what food people prefer.
I better think of all the foods that I can put on the list, but I think I'll narrow it down to about 4.
And don't forget us vegetarians.
Now it's your turn, Sigra. What data do you need to collect?
Well, that's obvious. I need to know how many people are going to be coming by car, by taxi, and how many are walking.
Some might have motorbikes and bicycles.
True.
Wait, how do we collect all that data?
Let me give you some ways to collect data, and then you can decide which way works best for you. Observation is one way to collect data. This is when you record what you see. For example, you may have noticed that you and your friends are always tired by the last lesson of the day. So you can decide that you want to find out if this is true for the whole class. One way to find out is to watch your class's behavior during the first and last lessons and compare your findings.
Surely we could just ask them how they feel during both lessons.
Not really. Then you would put ideas about being tired into their heads before you've had a chance to test them. But asking people works well for many other situations. We call this method an interview. Another method is to ask people questions and fill in their replies on a questionnaire. Questionnaires are useful when you want to find out the opinions of a group of people. For example, if you think that your school should have 2 short breaks a day instead of 1 long one, you would need to ask others in your school if they support this idea. If enough people like the idea, then you can suggest it to the principal. You may have seen market researchers collecting data this way at shopping centers and on the street. They approach passers-by and ask questions about a product. But an interview is not always necessary. You can hand out questionnaires and let people fill them in for themselves. Then they can be collected from a collection point. This saves time instead of doing hundreds of interviews.
Surely if you leave it to them, some of them won't even bother to fill it in.
There's always a chance that will happen. So you have to weigh up the time taken with interviews and being sure of getting all the questionnaires back. If you don't think any of the methods we've talked about so far are suitable, another way to collect data is to do some research. You can find information in encyclopedias and books or on the internet. This data is not original as it was collected by someone else. But if you use this method, it's important to say where the information comes from. Otherwise, you are stealing someone else's work. This type of theft is called plagiarism.
But then when will be the best time to do this data collecting?
Good question. You would normally use this method to find out about something that has taken several years. For example, you may want to know how maths was taught to 15-year-olds in 1920 and then compare it with the way maths is taught today. It's impossible to observe a classroom in 1920, so we have to use someone else's observations. It's also useful when we are trying to find information about things that are not part of our immediate experience, like things that happen in a place far away from us. For example, the education system of Ghana has improved enormously over the past few years, and it would be cheaper to use someone else's research than to travel all the way there. These are just a few ways of collecting data: observation, interviews, questionnaires, and research. Which one do you think will be of the most use to you?
I reckon research. It's the least work. All we have to do is just go into the band's websites and then we'll see which one is the most popular in South Africa.
Hang on, they'll all claim to be the best in South Africa. I think that information is biased.
Totally, I agree. And anyway, we're not looking for the most popular band in South Africa. We're looking for the most popular band amongst the teenagers that are most likely to come to our concert. So we should ask them.
Absolutely. We should interview the teenagers in the neighborhoods around us. That will give us more accurate data.
How about we just give them a questionnaire?
Good idea. But will they all come back?
I'm sure we'll get most of them back. So let's go for the questionnaire.
That's probably the best decision for what you want. Now, Sigra, what about the transport?
I suppose I could watch and record how pupils come to school.
But then that's going to take forever. Why can't you just ask them how they come to school? I'm sure they'll tell you.
Okay. Perhaps we can add a question about transport to your question about which bands they like. What about your daughter, Gerard?
Well, we could always add a question to your questionnaire that says, which food would you prefer to eat at the concert?
With that range of information needed, a questionnaire is definitely the best way to go. And I'm sure people will be honest about their favorite band, what food they prefer, and how they will get to the concert.
So you were right. Data handling does help us. So now what do we do?
You'll need to write down some clear questions to ask, and you'll need to decide which people to ask in order to get good data. But that's for another lesson. Now it's your turn to think about collecting data. I suggest you take the task questions from each of our lessons and use them for a data handling situation in your own school. The example about the number of breaks at school we mentioned earlier is just one suggestion. Should you have 1 break or 2 breaks at school? 1. What information do you need? 2. How will you collect this information? That's it for today. Thank you for joining us. Till next time, goodbye. Bye.